He grabbed her badge, the one she'd worn for 31 years, and dropped it on the floor in front of the entire department. "You don't belong here anymore," Garrett Sims said. "You never did." Nobody moved. 14 people standing in that break room, and not one of them said a word. The woman on the floor was Dr. Miriam Osei, chief of nephrology at Hargrove Regional Medical Center, Baltimore, board certified, published in 4 major journals, the only person in that building who had ever testified before a Senate subcommittee on healthcare equity. She was 61 years old, 5'3", and she had just been knocked sideways into the counter, hard enough to send her coffee across the tile. She looked down at her badge. She did not reach for it yet. She looked up at Garrett Sims instead. And here is what you need to understand about that look. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even anger. It was the specific, quiet expression of a woman who had just decided something. 6 weeks earlier, Miriam Osei had not been anyone's problem. She had taken a consulting position at Hargrove Regional after 30 years at Johns Hopkins, not because she needed the work, not because she needed the money, but because the nephrology department at Hargrove had a patient mortality rate that embarrassed by everyone who looked at it. The Black patients in their dialysis program were dying at twice the rate of comparable institutions. Someone had finally called her. Someone had finally called her. She came in quiet. That was deliberate. Miriam had learned a long time ago that when you walk into a broken system, you do not announce the fire. You find where the smoke is coming from first. Her first week, she said almost nothing. She observed. She read charts. She sat in on rounds without speaking. She ate lunch alone in her office, which was a converted storage room on the 3rd floor, with one window that overlooked the parking garage. The office had been assigned to her before she arrived. She noted that. She did not say anything about it. What she did was unpack a single cardboard box, her stethoscope, a photograph of her daughter's medical school graduation, and a small legal pad on which she wrote, in her careful handwriting, the date at the top of the first page. That skim was the beginning of everything. Garrett Sims was the kind of man who filled a hallway. He was the chief of internal medicine, which technically had nothing to do with Miriam's department, but at Hargrove, Garrett Sims had a way of making everything his business. He was 54, loud in the way that men who have never been told to be quiet are loud, and he had a habit of standing in doorways during other people's meetings as if his physical presence alone granted him authority. His problem with Miriam started on her 4th day. She had requested access to 5 years of dialysis outcome data, standard practice for anyone conducting a departmental review. The request went through the hospital's data coordinator, a quiet woman named Helen, who approved it within the hour. By the next morning, Helen had sent Miriam an email retracting the approval. She cited a technical issue with the data system. The data system was not having a technical issue. Miriam knew this because she had used it herself the previous afternoon. She wrote the date, the request, and the retraction on her legal pad. She wrote Helen's name, and then she wrote, in parentheses. Not her decision. She submitted the request again through a different channel. It was denied again, this time citing protocol review. She wrote that down too. By the end of her 2nd week, Miriam had learned the shape of the problem. Garrett Sims controlled information flow at Hargrove the way a dam controls water. He had been there for 19 years. He knew which administrators owed him favors, which department heads were afraid of him, and which nurses had learned to route around him just to get their jobs done. He had a group, 4 other senior physicians who ate lunch together every Tuesday, who golfed together on weekends, who had collectively blocked the last 3 external reviews of Hargrove's outcomes data. Miriam had read about 2 of those blocked reviews in her research before accepting the position. She had not mentioned this to anyone. The group did not include her in their Tuesday lunches. She had not expected them to. What she had not expected was how quickly they made the hostility visible. It started with the small things. Her patient consultations were consistently scheduled in the wrong room, then not corrected when she arrived. Conference calls she was supposed to be included on happened without her. Her name was misspelled on the department directory. Dr. Miriam Osei. and when she sent a correction, it was fixed for 1 week and then reverted. One of Sims's closest allies, a cardiologist named Dr. Preston Webb, started referring to her in meetings as the consultant, never by her name, never by her title. "Can someone bring the consultant up to speed?" he would say, with a specific tone that made consultant sound like a temporary inconvenience. Miriam wrote it down every time, the date, the context, the exact words. She had been keeping records like this since 1994. She knew what they were for. The third week, they came for her patients. There were 6 dialysis patients Miriam had flagged for immediate case review. Patients whose treatment protocols were outdated, whose lab work had been inconsistently followed, 2 of whom she believed were at serious risk. She had written up her assessments and submitted them through the appropriate channels. 3 of the assessments were returned to her with a note from the department's medical director, a man named Dr. Howard Cargill, who was 70 years old and had not updated his clinical guidelines since 2009. The note said her recommendations were outside the scope of her consulting role. She read that note 3 times. Then she called the patient families directly. This was within her authority as a licensed physician. She knew that. She had checked twice with Hargrove's legal team, a call she had placed on her second day, before anyone had done anything worth documenting, because Miriam Osi had not stayed alive in medicine for 31 years without knowing when to read the terrain. The families were grateful. 2 of them had been trying to get answers about their loved one's declining condition for months. When Garrett Sims found out she had contacted the families, he appeared in her doorway within the hour. He did not knock. "You went around Cargill," he said. Miriam looked up from her desk. "I exercised my clinical judgment as a licensed physician. That's not going around anyone. You don't understand how this hospital works." "I understand how medicine works," she said. "That's why I'm here." He looked at her for a long moment with an expression she recognized, the particular confusion of a man who expected a reaction and did not receive one. Then he left. She added his visit to her legal pad. Time, 3:47 p.m. Duration approximately 90 seconds. No witnesses. She made a note to find witnesses for the next one. The Tuesday lunch group escalated in week 4. Dr. Webb started challenging her in departmental meetings openly, interrupting her mid-sentence to clarify things she had said clearly. Dr. Cargill began copying her supervisor at the consulting firm on every email he sent her, framing her clinical recommendations as concerns raised by the external consultant, as if she were a problem to be managed rather than a physician doing her job. The worst was a man named Dr. Vincent Sloan. Sloan was young, early 40s, aggressive in the specific way that men are aggressive when they feel the ground shifting. He had been angling for a department head position for 2 years. Miriam's presence and the implication of her review threatened his timeline. He seemed to understand, instinctively, that if her review concluded what it was going to conclude, the people responsible for Hargrove's outcome failures would need to answer for them. He was not wrong. Sloan started a rumor that Miriam's data was flawed. He didn't say it publicly. He was too careful for that. He said it quietly, in hallways, in the way that rumors that are meant to travel always travel. One of the nephrology nurses mentioned it to Miriam in passing, not realizing she was delivering a message. Miriam thanked her. Then she called her former department chief at Hopkins and asked him to write a letter affirming her methodology. He wrote it the same afternoon. 3 paragraphs, sent directly to Hargrove's chief medical officer, copied to Miriam. She did not mention this to Sloan. She let him keep talking. In week 5, it stopped being professional. She was in the break room on a Thursday morning, 7:15 a.m., when Garrett Sims walked in with Webb and Sloan and a 4th physician she had seen in passing but never spoken to. She was the only person in the room. Sims said something to Webb that made Webb laugh. Then he said, loudly enough that she could not have not heard it, "Some people just don't know when door is closed to them." She poured her coffee. She said nothing. Webb said, "Imagine thinking a 3-month contract means you belong here." Miriam turned around. She looked at them calmly. "Good morning, gentlemen." None of them answered her. She took her coffee and left. In the hallway, she paused and wrote the time, the location, and the exact words on her legal pad from memory. She wrote all 4 names. That night, she sent an encrypted copy of her documentation, everything, all 5 weeks, to her personal attorney, a woman named Ruth who had handled 3 previous workplace matters for Miriam over the years, and who responded at 11 p.m. with 2 words, "Good. Continue." What happened the following Monday was the moment everything became irreversible. The department held its monthly case review, a meeting that Miriam was not technically required to attend, but which she had attended every month since her arrival, because she believed in being present. 14 people in the room. Department head, senior physicians, 3 nurses, 2 residents. She had prepared a presentation, 12 slides, 5 patient cases, outcome data with comparative benchmarks, clearly sourced, clearly labeled. She had rehearsed it the night before, not because she needed to rehearse it, but because she believed that when you are a black woman presenting facts that make powerful people uncomfortable, you do not give them any technical reason to dismiss you. She had been doing this her entire career. She was very good at it. She got through 3 slides before Sims interrupted. "We've seen this data," he said. "You haven't," she said. "This is new. It's the same narrative you've been pushing since you got here. It's the mortality data from the last 5 years, compared to 6 peer institutions. The numbers are the numbers, Dr. Sims." He stood up. He was a large man, and he stood up in the deliberate way that large men stand up when they want you to notice it. "What this institution does not need," he said, "is someone coming in from the outside with a temporary contract trying to tell us that everything we've built here is wrong." "I'm not saying everything is wrong," Miriam said. Her voice was level. It had been level for 5 weeks. "I'm saying that black patients in your dialysis program are dying at twice the rate of comparable hospitals, and that the data shows specific, correctable reasons for that. If that's uncomfortable, I understand. But my job is to very quiet." Sims looked at her with something that had moved past professional hostility into something more personal. "Your job," he said, "ends when your contract ends." "Yes," she said, "it does, but the data doesn't." He picked up her badge. She had set it on the table when she connected her laptop, a habit, and he held it for a moment. Then he dropped it on the floor. "You don't belong here anymore," he said. "You never did." He walked out. Webb and Sloan followed. 3 others left without speaking. The remaining 9 people in the room did not look at her directly. Miriam looked at her badge on the floor. She left it there for exactly 5 seconds. She was counting. Then she picked it up, clipped it back on, looked at the 9 people remaining in the room, and said, "Does anyone have questions about slides 4 through 12? 2 people asked questions. A 3rd-year resident named James, and a nurse named Constance who had been in nephrology for 11 years, and who asked 3 sharp, specific questions that told Miriam she had read every word of the presentation before the meeting. They stayed for 40 minutes. Miriam answered every question. When they left, she sat alone in the room for a moment, and here is the part that most people would not understand. She was not shaken. She was something else entirely. She was resolved. There is a difference, and Miriam knew the difference because she had learned it a long time ago, in a place that had nothing to do with medicine. What most people at Hargrove Regional Medical Center did not know, what Garrett Sims did not know, what Preston Webb did not know, what Vincent Sloan most certainly did not know, was what Miriam had been before she was a physician. She had grown up in Baltimore. She had gone to Morgan State on a full academic scholarship, and before medical school, before Hopkins, before 31 years of clinical practice, she had spent 7 years as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Organized Crime Division. She had been recruited out of her undergraduate program, worked financial crimes for 4 years, then organized crime for 3 more. She had testified in federal court 9 times. She had built 3 cases from nothing, no initial evidence, no cooperating witnesses, and watched all 3 result in conviction. She left in 1989 to go to medical school. People had thought she was unusual. She had thought medicine and investigation had more in common than most people realized. Both required you to find the truth in systems designed to obscure it. She had been finding the truth in systems designed to obscure it for 37 years. On Tuesday morning, Miriam sent 2 emails. The first was to Dr. James Whitmore, Hargrove's chief medical officer, a man she had met once, briefly, at her onboarding. She summarized her documentation. She attached 47 pages of it. She noted the date of every incident, the names of every witness, the content of every verbal exchange she had recorded from memory within the hour of its occurrence. She noted the 3 denied data requests with their paper trail. She noted the Hopkins letter. She noted Monday's meeting. She wrote it the way she had been trained to write investigative reports, factual, precise, without emotional language, with every claim supported by a document, a date, or a named corroborating source. The second email went to the Maryland Office of Healthcare Quality. It included the mortality data, the comparative benchmarks, and a formal request for an independent clinical review. She sent both emails at 9:03 a.m. By 11 a.m., Whitmore's assistant had called to schedule a meeting. By 1 p.m., Miriam had received an acknowledgement from the state office. She ate lunch at her desk. She had brought it from home, a container of jollof rice her daughter had sent up from Atlanta the previous weekend, with a note that said, "Don't let them get to you." She ate it slowly. She looked out the window at the parking garage. She thought about Monday. She thought about the badge on the floor. She did not feel sorry for Garrett Sims. She did not feel sorry for any of them. But she did feel something, not triumph, not yet, something more like the specific tiredness that comes after you have been patient for a very long time, and the patience has finally done its work. The meeting with Whitmore lasted 2 hours. He was a careful man, small and deliberate, who read everything she put in front of him without speaking. When he finished, he asked her 4 questions. She answered all 4 with documentation. He said, "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" she said. "I needed to be certain I had everything. I only make this kind of accusation once." He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded, slowly, the way that people nod when they have just understood something they should have understood earlier. "I'm going to need to involve HR and legal," he said. "I assumed you would," she said. "I've already spoken to my attorney." "Of course you have," he said quietly, and it wasn't sarcastic. It was something closer to relief. He was looking at a woman who had built a case he did not have to build for her. He was looking at 47 pages of documentation, a letter from the former department chief of one of the most respected medical institutions in the country, and a formal state inquiry already in motion. His problem, Miriam understood, was now manageable. That was why she had done it this way. The investigation took 3 weeks. Miriam continued to work during those 3 weeks. She completed her patient reviews. She submitted her final report on the dialysis program, 63 pages, with specific protocol recommendations, staff training requirements, and a proposed timeline for implementation. The report went to Whitmore and to the state office simultaneously. She passed Garrett Sims in the hallway twice. He did not look at her. She did not look away. She passed Webb once in the elevator. He got out 1 floor early. Sloan, she did not see at all after the 2nd week. She later learned he had taken a sudden leave of absence. On the morning the investigation concluded, Miriam was in her office, the storage room with the window overlooking the parking garage, when Whitmore called. Dr. Cargill had been placed on administrative leave pending a full clinical review of his department's practices. Sims had been formally censured and removed from 2 committee positions pending HR review. Webb had received a formal written warning. The hospital's legal team had determined that the pattern of behavior toward Miriam constituted actionable workplace discrimination and had recommended a settlement. Miriam said, "I'm not as quiet for a moment." Whitmore was quiet for a moment. "What are you interested in?" he asked. "Implementation," she said. "I want to see the protocol changes go in. I want a follow-up review in 6 months conducted by an external team of my choosing, and I want the outcome data published, publicly, with the hospital's name on it, so that what happened here can serve as a case study for other institutions." Another silence. "That's a significant ask," Whitmore said. "Yes," Miriam said. "It is." He agreed to all 3. The state review, which Miriam's referral had triggered, resulted in a formal citation against Hargrove Regional and a mandated corrective action plan. The citation was public record. 3 regional health news outlets covered it. One used the phrase, "decades of systemic neglect" in a headline. Another ran a photograph of the hospital's entrance. None of them knew Miriam's name because she had not given it to them. She had not given it to anyone. She was not interested in the story. She was interested in what came after the story. In the months that followed, the dialysis program at Hargrove Regional implemented all 14 of her protocol recommendations. A new department head was appointed, a woman named Dr. Sandra Boateng, whom Miriam had recommended to Whitmore in writing, with a 3-page summary of her qualifications. The outcome data, tracked quarterly, began to shift. Not fast, not dramatically, but it shifted. James, the third-year resident who had asked questions at the end of the Monday meeting, sent her an email 4 months later. He had started an informal working group among the residents to review patient equity metrics monthly. He wanted to know if she would be willing to be an occasional resource. She said yes. Miriam's consulting contract ended in December on schedule. On her last day, she cleaned out the office, the photograph of her daughter's graduation, the stethoscope, the legal pad, the original one, now full, and 2 others she had started after it. She had kept every page. Her attorney had advised her to keep them for 7 years. She planned to keep them longer. She left no note. She did not say goodbye to the department formally, because she had never been welcomed into it formally, and she did not believe in marking exits that had not been earned. She did say goodbye to Constance, the nurse, who had asked 3 sharp questions. They had coffee together in the break room, the same break room, on her last morning. Constance talked about her plans to go back for her nurse practitioner certification. Miriam listened. She asked the right questions. When they were done, she stood up and said, "You're going to be good at it." Constance laughed. "You don't even know that." "I know the questions you ask," Miriam said. "That's enough." She took the elevator down. She walked through the lobby. She pushed through the front door into the December cold and stood on the sidewalk outside Hargrove Regional Medical Center. She thought about Garrett Sims, not with anger, not anymore, but with the particular clarity that you get when something is over and you can see the whole shape of it from the outside. He had looked at her and seen something small and temporary. A consultant, an outsider, a problem with an end date. He had not been wrong about the end date. He had been wrong about everything else. Miriam put on her coat. She had a flight to Atlanta. Her daughter had invited her for the long weekend, and her son-in-law was making dinner, and her granddaughter had started walking and had an opinion, apparently, about everything. She had her carry-on. She had her laptop. She had the legal pads in her bag. She walked to the parking garage and got in her car and did not look back at the building. She had done what she came to do. The patients were safer. The data was public. The record existed. That was the thing about records. They did not care whether you were welcomed. They did not care whether your name was spelled right on the directory or whether someone dropped your badge on the floor in front of 14 witnesses. They existed independent of all of that. They were more durable than humiliation, more durable than institutional indifference, more durable than the particular blindness of men who had been in power so long they had forgotten that power was something you earned. Miriam Osei had earned everything she had, twice over, in 2 different fields, across 3 decades, and she had documented every step of the way. She merged onto I-95 South and turned up the radio, and by the time she reached the city limits, she had already stopped thinking about Hargrove Regional entirely.